there, my name is David Kenny. Welcome to Light from Above. Glad you could be with us on the program today. Today I'm very thankful I can have a special guest, a dear friend of mine and our family. This is Brother Dean Miller. Dean Miller is a preacher for the Hartville Church of Christ in Hartville, Ohio. And Dean, thank you very much for taking some time out and sitting down with us on the program today.
Thank you, and I've been looking forward to it.
Well, we just had an excellent presentation with Dean. He spoke to our area men's meeting here in Wadsworth, talked about the blessings and challenges of widowhood, and he's doing some very good work in that area. We also, the men there and some other people got together, and we presented him with this nice plaque here, picture, and we'll talk a little bit about that as we go along. But this is in tribute to him and his wife and the work that they did together. Also, he is a graduate of Hartville University. It was a college back then. So we'll talk a little bit about that as we get into this. But I want to go back, Dean. Our families have been connected since the 70s, I believe.
1970s.
Yeah, 1970s.
Don't go back all the way to the 1800s.
Okay? Yeah, the 20th century. 70s.
Exactly.
And it really goes back to your parents. And we have this picture of your family. Why don't you tell them a little bit about your parents and your siblings and a little bit about that, and then we'll talk a little bit more about your dad and the things we talked about with him.
Okay. I grew up in a home of 4 boys, and I think the thing I'm most proud of with my mother is she didn't have to go to a mental hospital after the last one left home. We were a difficult bunch to deal with, but us 4 boys were blessed with a couple of parents who had their struggles in life, and finally toward the end of their life, maybe in the last third of their life, found a real peace in their life. But the 4 of us, most of us were born in the Columbus, Ohio area. My dad was from the Huntington, West Virginia area, around Canova, Cerrito, more locally Pritchard, West Virginia. And eventually he migrated up to New Philadelphia, Ohio, and that's really where my dad and your dad became connected.
Yeah, we've had a long relationship with your father, and we'll show a picture of your father and mother together. This is later in life. You mentioned to me earlier that there's almost like 2 versions of your father. I knew the latter version. Mm-hmm. A lot of people didn't know the former version. And if you don't mind, I'd like for you to share with them a little bit about the change that Christianity brought to him and to your family.
Okay. My father grew up in a home where he had a Christian father and a Christian mother. But when he decided to leave home, like most people did at 18 years old back then, he not only left home, but he left the Lord, he left the church, and he lived a life of little restraint. He got involved in a lot of things that folks struggle with nowadays in regard to alcohol in particular. And he lived a life separate and apart from God, his church, and the Lord's will in his life. And I grew up in that family, for the most part, with a father like that until I was 15 years old, and that's when we moved to New Philadelphia, Ohio. And my dad at that point in time in his life decided that he needed to turn his life around. He needed, although he'd become a Christian when he was at home as a teenager, he came to realize that he was living a very foolish life for a number of decades, and so he decided that he was going to go back to the Lord, he was going to go back to church, his family was going to go to church, and so that was my first experience with anything of a religious nature, was in going to church at the New Philadelphia Church of Christ in New Philadelphia, Ohio. And my dad was restored to the Lord first. My mother then became a Christian. I became a Christian. My brothers became Christians as well. But previous to that time, my father lived a life that was very sinful, very foolish, and very unhealthy. And I have a lot of memories from growing up of him having these issues and some of the collateral damage that was experienced in our family because of his poor choices. But the dramatic change in his life, when he started going back to church and he started committing himself from the heart to the Lord, he broke a lot of those bad habits of his past. He created new habits. He became intensely involved in Bible study. He got back into song leading, and he became a great song leader. He became a great preacher, and he would go around and he would preach for these small churches that couldn't support a full-time preacher, and thoroughly enjoyed that. While he was working full-time up till the time he was 70 years old, he, on weekends, would go to these smaller churches and he would preach for them. There was such a dramatic change in him when he came back to the Lord. And our family life was so drastically different because of what he let the Lord do in his life. And it really displayed the power of God in his life. And it made a real impression on me. And at that point in time, all four of us boys, through those experiences, had to come to decide in our own life, were we going to follow the bad dad, or were we going to follow the good dad? You know, were we going to embrace the change that he made in his life and see the wisdom in that, or were we going to go down that unhealthy path that he did when he left home when he was 18 years old? And so that drastic difference for me was beneficial, because I came to appreciate the fact that people can change, people can improve, and God can do marvelous things in a person's life. The sad thing, though, about that change in his life is he always lived with a sense of regret about the years that he had wasted and the unhealthy influence of that time. And that was one of the real sad things about that experience. I think sometimes we don't realize that when a prodigal son comes home, though they may be forgiven and enjoy the forgiveness and grace of their father and family and others, the reality is there are consequences for making those foolish choices. And sometimes those consequences can be experienced for years, and sometimes maybe even the rest of your life, as you carry the weight of that regret about what you wasted, maybe even for decades previous in your life. So it was a great lesson learned by observation from my father.
Well, I know he had a lot of influence on me. I told you earlier that, you know, the first person outside of my father who baptized me to meet me and congratulate me was your father. Matter of fact, to this day, I still have, among other things, I still have the first $2 bill, 1976, was given to me by your father, and I still have it. And so I have a lot of great memories of your father. Of course, you know, I didn't know him in the days that you spoke of prior. And so to me, you know, when I hear that, you know, my father was this way before you met him, you know, I could really, it's almost, I mean, I don't doubt what you're saying, but it's almost hard to believe because when you see him the way that he was later in life compared to the former, I mean, he was definitely a changed man.
Dramatic change, dramatic change. And in regard to your relationship that you alluded to with your father and my father, in digging around for some pictures to use for today, in rooting around in some of my father's things, I happened to find this Bible that I didn't even realize that he had. It says, "This Bible presented to Ralph and Ruby Miller on the 5th of January, 1977 at New Philadelphia, Ohio, by Warren and Kay Kinney."
Now it says, "What's the occasion? For your many kindnesses to our family." That's definitely true.
Yeah, there was just a real special relationship between my father and your father and our families even back then.
Oh yeah.
And so that's really a precious keepsake now.
Oh, it is, absolutely.
Yeah.
Of course, that changed you, and that set your life on a different path than probably that it might have been otherwise. And so you go on, and I'm going to show some pictures of your family, but I want to start with you and your wife. This is your wife. Why don't you tell them a little bit about Ruth Ann?
Ruth Ann was a sweet gal that happened to be attending the New Philadelphia Church of Christ when we started going to church there. And to be honest with you, David, the thing I was first interested in when I went to church was that sweet teenager, 15 years old, Ruth Ann Reed. The Lord became the most important thing, but she sure got my attention first, to be honest about it. And so we dated through our high school years. And then when I finished high school, I went on to Freed-Hardeman University, at the time Freed-Hardeman College in West Tennessee, in Henderson, Tennessee. And then after I finished a year of school down there, I came back home that summer, and I worked 3 jobs, and she worked a job also, and we got married after my freshman year in college. And then we went down to Henderson, Tennessee again, and she got a job as a dental assistant and receptionist while I went to school full time. And that's how our married life began. And we were married for 41 years. She passed away this past December, but it was a great life together, and she was a precious spouse and a terrific preacher's wife. She had contracted Parkinson's disease that, of course, changed her appearance and her ability to function. The picture that we have of her and I is from September of 2012, and she passed away in December of 2013. But she was a special gal, and we had a great life together.
They had 3 daughters. Show a picture of your 3 daughters. Why don't you tell them a little bit about them?
Yeah, we have our 3 children. Michelle, she was born in Memphis, Tennessee, a month before I left Fried-Hardeman College to come back to Northeast Ohio. And then our second daughter, Melissa, was born in Springfield, Ohio. And then our third daughter was born in Canton, Ohio. And all 3 of them now are in their 30s, and they all live in different states. But we're still a very close family, and they were a terrific help when my wife was struggling and I was struggling with her decline physically.
And then, obviously, they grow up, they become married, and this next picture shows you what happened. You end up having this.
Grandchildren are the investment that you make in your children, and you get a great return on that investment. We have 5 grandchildren. In the particular picture here that we have, actually all 5 children are there. You can only see 4 of them, but the 5th one is, I guess, what you'd call in the oven, and she was born a little bit after this picture was taken. We do have another picture, though, of all the kids that were together when we were doing a Parkinson's disease walk, supporting the research and the help for people who have Parkinson's and for their families. We have participated frequently in walks to help those efforts of research and service to those families. And so our grandchildren are all involved with that, as well as our children and our sons-in-law.
And you have a special name for the team of people that go out and and tell them about that. And you show a group photo of them here, all these red shirts.
Yeah, those are not Ohio State Buckeye shirts. What those are Nana's Walkers shirts. The group, together as a family, we identify ourselves by using that terminology, Nana's Walkers. They always referred to her as Nana, not as Grandma, but or Granny, but it was always Nana. And so we thought it was appropriate to call them Nana's Walkers. This last walk that we participated in just a few months ago, our family raised over $1,600 for ministering, helping, and assisting families with Parkinson's disease in the northwest section of the state of Georgia.
Well, as I mentioned earlier, Dean, we presented some friends, Christian preachers and Christians, and some congregations got together, and we reserved a seat in Old Main, which is a part of Fried-Hardeman University. It's Fried-Hardeman College back then, and we presented him this certificate, and it says the Dean and Ruth Ann Miller seat in Old Chapel Hall, presented by Christians in Northeast Ohio to Dean and Ruth Ann Miller in recognition of ministry and service. They have been working together as a team for many years. I know that myself and other preacher friends of Dean and others have been very concerned for Dean and his family with the passing of Ruth Ann on Christmas Day in 2013. So we wanted to do something to show our support for him. Dean is taking this experience and he is channeling it to try to help other people that are going through those types of things. Matter of fact, he spoke on the challenges and blessings of widowhood. Obviously, we don't have time to repeat all of that, but why don't you give him just a little bit of a flavor about what would the blessings be of widowhood?
We naturally think about the challenges because we see it as such a difficult time in life, and it is. It is a terrific challenge. It would be hard to come up with a more difficult challenge than experiencing life again single. After having the love, experiencing the loss is just a real tragic time in your life. It involves a lot of emotional and mental and practical challenges. But what we sometimes don't think about is that there are blessings. Now, thinking about those blessings is not disrespecting your marriage, and it's not disrespecting the person who's passed, but it's accepting the reality that there are blessings. You know, David, I've come to appreciate this, and I really try to remind people about this, that no matter how troubled you are in your life, no matter how difficult your burdens are that you're bearing, you always have more blessings than you have burdens. You know, we don't think about that enough. It's easy for us to think about our burdens because that's our challenges, and it seems like they can become so consuming. What we sometimes don't appreciate is we have blessings. We not only have blessings, but we always have more blessings than we have burdens. We just don't take the time to stop and reflect about that. For one thing, for instance, through caring for my wife, one of the things that I came to appreciate was the fact that I was really not a thankful man like I should have been. I came to realize that there were a lot of things I'd taken for granted. Her love and support and what she was able to do, that she lost the ability to do because of the Parkinson's disease. But then also, I stopped one day and I thought, you know, I always thank God for my food. But it dawned on me after my wife was not able to eat anymore and had a feeding tube put in, I thought, you know, I've never thanked God for the ability to eat the food, the ability to taste the food, the ability to digest the food, the ability to benefit from that food. I had never thought about that. And so I learned through that process that I really had a lot of things. If we think more specifically instead of generically, we have tremendous blessings no matter how difficult our burdens. And the same thing is true even with widowhood. As difficult as it is, and it is to some degree a burden to be born, but there are tremendous blessings that go with widowhood. I think one of them is that, you know, previous to the person's passing, you had a lot of time and attention and effort invested in that relationship. And that's the way it should be. To have a good, healthy marriage, which all of us ought to strive to have. If we're going to have a marriage, we need to strive to have a magnificent marriage. Well, that demands a lot of investment. Well, when you no longer have that person, what are you going to do with your time, your attention, your resources, your energy? Well, you need, eventually, a widow needs, or a widower needs to find things to invest that they previously invested in the marriage into something else, especially for the benefits of others. You know, widows and widowers have experienced love and loss. It would be a shame if we didn't take that experience and then try to help other people with their love and their loss. And you have the time and the energy to do that now because you don't have the responsibilities that go with marriage. So there's the blessing of what I call the availability and the flexibility that you don't have when you're married. Mm-hmm. And thinking that way, again, is not a disrespect to the marriage, but it's actually seeing the reality and trying to embrace the reality of the widowed lifestyle. We have to do something, we have to move on, and at some point in time, you know, after we've come to accept the reality of what's happened to us, at some point in time in our life, we have to embrace a new life and try to create a new normal for ourselves. And we can do that. And we have resources now and experiences now that we can use to help other people. So there's the blessing of the opportunity to serve other people like you didn't have previous when you were married.
Yeah, it's a great challenge. I know that it's a whole, you know, that paradigm shift, that kind of terminology. I mean, it's basically taking your life and reshuffling in it and try to, you know, to do the best you can. One of the things now, thinking back, you may remember me asking you, because I asked you a few questions months ago while we were working on this project. Mm-hmm. You may remember me asking you about you going to Free Hardeman and you talking about how Ruth Ann had to work mm-hmm. to help put you through school, which is why, you know, we wanted to do this, because I know that she spent a lot of her time and a lot of her energy and a lot of her efforts to work to put you through Free Hardeman. And she has been with you for so many years. I imagine, it's going to be a huge adjustment for you and your family and all that. And that's one of the reasons why we wanted to honor you this way, because we knew that she spent a lot of time of her life helping you all the way through to this point. And looking at that, to me, it's very apparent that she would want you to continue to help other people and to use the time that you had together to be able to help other people, because she's always been a very much a person that tried to help other people.
The way I describe it, David, is she got, during the time that I was in college, she got her PhD degree, put hubby through degree. And that was her investment into our future life and our ministry together. And so if it weren't for that investment, then I wouldn't have had that opportunity.
Right.
So I'm deeply thankful to her, not just for the 41 years that we spent together and the blessing that was and the help that she was in my ministry and in my life, but also so thankful for her investment, especially during my school time, providing for us the revenue stream that kept us barely above water during that period of time in our life. And it's so appropriate that you would give this gift. And of course, I did not realize you were doing this, but one of the memories I have of the old main building was sitting in chapel one day, and that particular day, J. Walker Whittle, who was the head of the business department at the time, he was speaking at chapel. And I remember him making this observation. Now here I was, an 18-year-old, maybe 19-year-old young man, and I was sitting there in the chapel hall of that old building, and he was directing his attention to the boys, and he was reading that passage in Ephesians 5 about Christ loving the church and loving the church so much that he gave himself for the church. And he made this comment, David. He said, "Boys, if you don't love her enough to die for her, give her a break and let her go. Do not marry her." And here I had that experience that you were not aware of in Chapel Hall, in that building, and now there's a seat there, how appropriately, the Dean and Ruth Miller seat in Old Main Chapel Hall. So that's very appropriate, because frankly, I'd never thought about that concept until J. Walker Whittle made that statement. And it made a real impression on me. Well, to the point that, here I was, an 18-year-old young man, and I'm still remembering it now in my 60s. So it made an impression.
We'll show you a picture of the building with the foundation stone. You can take a look at it. It's definitely a historical landmark. When it was erected by A.G. Frieden and B. Hardeman several years ago, the school is named after them. And Dean, in the last few seconds, actually, we have. Why don't you give people just an insight on how much Free Hardeman University changed or helped you make this transition? Because you're coming from a non-Christian background, you become a Christian, and now you told me before it made a big difference to you. Why don't you give them a little bit of insight on that in the few minutes we have left?
Oh, tremendous difference. When I went to Free Hardeman College, my intention was to go to a Christian school to try to grow spiritually, to get a degree so that I could get a job to support myself and my wife and my family, and then maybe try to preach for smaller churches that couldn't support a full-time preacher. But after I was at Free Hardeman College for a year, I thought, boy, I need to seize the opportunity to give my life wholly to preaching the gospel and to serving the Lord in a full-time capacity in the local church setting. If it hadn't been for Free Hardeman College, if I'd gone to a state university, secular university of some sort, I would have not had the spiritual experiences that really changed my perspective and my values to cause me to commit myself to the full-time ministry. So I'm extremely thankful. I've been preaching now for 41 years, and a lot of it is because of the influence of Free Hardeman College when I went to school there.
And we'll show you the place where Dean preaches is the Hartville Church of Christ. There's the website address and the building and the meeting times and all that. Dean, we thank you very much for coming in and being a part of the program and sharing these thoughts with us today.
Thank you. I really enjoyed it.
Before we close our program today, we'd like to take a moment and review this roadmap to heaven with you, since the matter is so serious. There are many incorrect set of directions out there, and sadly so many people are following them. For example, some people have been given wrong turns. They believe things such as faith only, works only, or grace only. Or some attempt to change the order of the turns, being baptized before they even believe. Some people fail to realize what point they are on the map. Don't even open their Bibles yet, and they think they're saved already. As a person travels in a car or takes a hike, it has to follow the proper directions, so we must follow the proper directions to heaven. Let's take a look at the directions on our roadmap to heaven here. You have to look at these passages in your Bible for yourself. We'll just list the steps, the turns on the way. First is to believe or to have faith. And then number 2, to repent, to turn away from sin. Number 3 is to confess that Jesus is the Son of God. Number 4 is immersion, or to be baptized, which is a burial in water to have your sins washed away. And then you're added to the church by the Lord, not by a group of people, or not by giving some kind of testimonial experience or things like that. And then once you're added, you need to serve and worship the Lord faithfully all the days of your life. And the key word's faithfully. You don't waver. And that's very important. We need to keep in mind, too, that in Noah's day there was a big flood, and only people in the ark were saved from the flood. The same is true today. There is no salvation outside the Lord's church. Where are you on the roadmap to heaven? Thanks for watching our program. Please let us know if we can assist you with further information for your journey.